All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday, and welcome to our Making Q4, the season of performance creative webinar. We are really excited to be putting this on exclusively for our clients today, and be talking about all the things you need to do in order to have a great Q4 and great creative. So just give it a second to get our slide deck up, and we will dive right in. Carla, let me know if you need a hand with screen sharing. There we go. Awesome. All right. So if we go to the next slide, we will chat through some logistics. The first is that the recording and slides will be in your inbox shortly after the session today. Everyone's favorite question. And so no worries. All of that will be at your fingertips by end of day today. Also, you can log back in anytime with that same link that has been in your inbox and in your calendar hold. We have all of our Q2 trial reports as well as our social commerce guide in the dashboard to the right. If you toggle over from chat to handouts, we have all of those, so make sure to download those. Also, make sure to join our chat, as many have already. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I myself am tuning in from Philly. We also got Orange County, California, New York, usually Atlanta, New York again, Chattanooga, Tennessee, San Diego. So from all corners. Also, you can submit questions for Carla and Kevin that we will tee up at the end of the session there as well, and make sure we do those during our live Q&A. Also, make sure to join our poll questions, and we have one that we'll get to momentarily, and a second that if you're interested in talking with our teams about how you perhaps could add creative to your portfolio of what you work with Tinuiti. I'll also introduce myself. My name is Carrie Mallett. I'm the Senior Content Specialist for Webinars here at Tinuiti, and I'll be hosting our webinar today. So I know everyone here is familiar about Tinuiti, but again, Tinuiti is the largest independent performance marketing firm across streaming TV and the triad of Google, Facebook, and Amazon. At Tinuiti, we understand that success requires both strategy and channel specialization. That approach uses awards and recognition across the industry, such as the American Business TV Awards and the Shorty Awards, and allows us to grow some amazing clients, like some of our creative clients that you see here. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Carla and Kevin to introduce themselves.
Thanks so much, Carrie. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Carla Anderson. I'm a creative director at Tinuiti, and I've been with the team for 5+ years, going on what feels like forever, and really excited to share our content for you today for how to win Q4. I'm also hailing from Hanover, Maryland, so halfway between Baltimore and DC, East Coast for the win. And I'll kick it over to Kevin.
Hey, and I'm also on the East Coast today. I'm Kevin Tyler, Director of Creative Strategy. I've been with Tinuiti a little bit less than Carla. So she's bringing the experience, but I come from all of my previous agencies have been in the creative brand space across big holding networks. So what I love doing is applying a creative mindset to a performance media shop. That's why I'm here. I love doing it. Yeah, and I'm excited to share some content today.
Awesome. Well, we are so excited to have you both with us. So we will go to the next slide. And Carla, too, if you're able to get the window to be full screen. We're not in full screen right now.
Oh, okay. Let's get that in order. Full screen matters. Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. No
all right. So we want to hear from you all. Do you all believe people's attention spans are getting shorter? Let us know in the poll dashboard. You can toggle over from chat to polls. Right now, we've got 100% yes. You notice agree with that we are. I would definitely, and continuing to be 100%. I would definitely agree with that. I know my own attention span is certainly getting shorter. And so we're going to get into why we're starting off with that question. So I'm going to go off stage and hand it over to Kevin and Carla.
Yeah, so this is going to be an interesting uphill battle. First of all, there's no right answer that I can tell. I am not a neuroscientist, but if you want to flip to the next slide, we can kind of get at the meat of why that feels more like a myth than a truth. And really, if you look at places where there's long form content like Netflix and YouTube, we know people will binge and spend the time on content that is interesting to them. It's not like they can't, it's not that content needs to be getting shorter. It's almost that as we have our phones in our hands all the time and short form is becoming more consumable, there's just simply more options for our attention to be taken away rather than our attention just by virtue of the media itself shortening our attention span. It's just easier to get sidetracked, essentially. But when you are focusing on the content, you are able to maintain attention. I promise you. I don't know if anyone else saw the Irishman on Netflix, like 3-hour epic. Maybe it was 4 hours, but I do think it's always important to poke that stat and that thinking and that mindset of my audience attention is just too short to serve them up a longer message or something like that. It needs to be as long as it is interesting. And that's kind of my golden rule here with creative, especially in the video space, is it's got to be as long as it is interesting.
I love that point, Kevin.
Yeah.
And I think it really ties into kind of our tactical playbook, that we've put together for today, because we're dealing with a lot of competition. We're dealing with shorter attention spans, but all that really means is in your media mix is that you've got to be a lot more strategic about your planning instead of just serving ads. You might have really great content, you might have really great product, but the strategy is really what's going to make sure that you're sending your content to the right consumer at the right time. So yep. I will head on over into our agenda for today. We're going to cover just kind of some of the things that Kevin was speaking to, the importance of a unified creative strategy to really win the holiday season. And then we'll get into our month-by-month tactical playbook with tips and tricks for developing creative that really delivers. And then we'll wrap things up with how to build a robust creative testing plan, because testing is everything. You know, we're a performance marketing agency, so we don't just put together creative and send it out into the wild. We gather the data, we test, we iterate to make sure that it's impactful and that you're getting your return on ad spend. All right, I'll kick it over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, and so, you know, like, first, we're going to lead off with like research of what is Q4, how are people behaving towards it, what can we expect out of consumer behavior this holiday season. You know, it's kind of a tricky situation, a little bit of instability out there, but overall, it's not doom and gloom. The wallets may tighten, but overall, it's a cautiously positive outlook. And this is across, you know, I feel like each week you have a different, you know, economic survey or study getting, you know, dropped that tries to skew one way or the other of, oh, it's going to be fine, or, oh no, it's going to be awful, just trying to get your clicks. But overall, the job market signals and the stats surrounding that is really why people feel like, whether you want to call it a recession, stagflation, or some kind of in-between word that I don't know. I did not get an economics degree, but I do know how to read, that it's going to be fine. Every survey is like, we plan on, you know, celebrating pretty much as normal, perhaps buying one or two fewer presents, being a little bit more deliberate with our discretionary spending this holiday season. Within that overall landscape, there are like really three key themes that we felt like was important to surface from all of these different research studies. And this gets factored into our playbook. And what should we be doing? What are the creative we should be making? Number one, when you have consumers being more thoughtful and being more deliberate and relying less on maybe more emotional purchases or impulse purchases, they start to call into question their brand loyalties that they've kind of just taken for granted for however long. So typically during times of, you know, a recession or whatever you want to call this, brand loyalties will get called into question. People are considering switching to cheap alternatives or purchasing a completely different brand due to pricing concerns. Not that they will, but they will consider it. And so that starts to form the need of, well, how are we hedging our branding and our brand messaging and our sense of self to the consumer? At the same time, I'm trying to appeal to their logic and trying to appeal to their pricing motives. Because we know, especially around the holiday season, you start to get a little more promotional. You have 45% of people looking for sales, and they're looking to cut back and really getting at the heart of what will provide me with the most value. I know I have to buy this, but how can I kind of save money while also, you know, celebrating the holidays that I sorely need after this year. And then the next stat is we know planning and shopping will start earlier and take place across multiple channels. You could argue it's probably been at this point like 2 decades worth of people learning how to shop online, but the past 2 years really accelerated people and forcing people to shop online and getting comfortable with it. So they know how to do their research. They know where to look. They are taking advantage of post-purchase payment offers like Klarna and Afterpay, and they've gotten pretty savvy at avoiding all the little supply chain hiccups. They're gravitating towards retailers that promise free shipping and give them clear, transparent delivery times. So as we look across channels in which ones are pulling and pushing consumers towards the landing pages and shopping pages, how are we using timing to do that? And when should we be doing that? So we've kind of outlined a few of our key recommendations on the next slide. This one is in response to the starting earlier. So you have, social platforms like Pinterest and Meta, and as well as Google's ecosystem and YouTube, basically citing past years and comparing it to what they expect to happen this year. Of when will consumers start shopping? When will they start planning? And when will they actually, start taking out their wallets and buying? I don't know if it's a surprise to anyone. I don't know if it was a surprise to me, really, but it will start earlier this year. Generally, the holiday season kicks off on Halloween. Pinterest is already reporting, people searching for things in July. And that could be Pinterest saying, advertise with us sooner and spend more money sooner. But the fact that it's kind of echoed across a lot of different platform agnostic surveys really call out the importance of people are trying to get ahead of it. They're, concerned about supply chain. They're concerned about maybe spreading their budget and their gifting spend using the Afterpay options that we just talked about, like Klarna and Afterpay. As well as just hitting multiple credit card statements, and giving themselves more time to research. So that's a key theme, is that planning is going to start sooner this season. And what you say, obviously, in the planning phase needs to be different than the actual shopping phase. What you say in September versus December, that creative copy needs to change. Next is, aligning all of the channel mix to head in the same direction. A lot of this, revolves around the idea that consumers who are exposed to or shop using a brand's multiple channels, or think of, I'm watching a YouTube video and then I'm seeing a Facebook ad and then I'm kind of going on a landing page and maybe looking at an Instagram ad, it's usually that signals higher intent audiences. They're warmed up, they're likely to spend more than those who aren't. So it's important to align all your channels with the same messaging, the same core set of what am I trying to say at this time, and ensuring it's coherent across your channel mix. If you want to go back real quick, a good question. No, good. A good question that I ask myself if I'm looking at a campaign plan, whether it's by month or within a smaller flight, is if I saw this ad in isolation and I hadn't seen anything else before or after, would it make sense? Does it communicate an action that I need to take? And does it work in sequence of a larger campaign creative? Does it feel like an evolution of what I've told someone before or what I want to tell them after? And so that's how I like to look at, larger, individual touch points of a campaign versus the whole thing. And then, of course, not forgetting about the landing page. I think so often we spend so much time on getting somewhere, pointing all of our media towards getting someone to take an action. And then the ad creative looks great, messaging is on point, they click through, and they get to a landing page, and it kind of breaks down. It's like, wait, where's the filtered product set that I was just looking at? Or this feels like a completely different brand than the one that drove me here. So ensuring and taking, really paying attention to your landing pages is going to be, I'm sure we all know this, but it's just please don't forget, because it happens way too often.
Yeah.
And then the third and final recommendation, and there's excuse of vulgarity, I just couldn't resist. I blurred the handout myself, don't worry.
Great image.
Yeah, I couldn't help. Is considering how creative needs to shift monthly. And that's what I was talking about, of what you tell someone within a planning mindset and a discovery mindset, thinking about, how large is my holiday budget going to be? Who am I going to get gifts for? kind of what are the trends that I need to be considering, what are good gifts. It's going to be different than telling someone in the very end of the holiday season, the last minute kind of. I fall into this category a lot. The early to mid December shoppers, where they need to know first and foremost, is this going to get there on time? Like that's one of the main messages that I want to know if I'm sending out a promotional ad that late in the season, knowing consumer mindsets around supply chain. And so we always are conscious, especially in very heavily promotional shopping and retail holidays such as this, of not cheapening our brand, not devaluing our brand positioning as we try to beat our competitors to the bottom of the funnel and get those clicks and those purchases. I think a lot of the times we focus too much on the brand, the promotion, and not the brand. And like I said before, you have yet another stat here. This is from, I think, Meta, that 91% of holiday shoppers that Facebook surveyed are likely to try a new brand during the holiday season. So again, we know we have to hedge our brand, and whether that happens early in the season so that it leaves you the space to pursue heavily promotional messaging later in the season, and that you've already kind of exposed your core audience to that brand message, and you're simply retargeting them with free shipping, get it in time for the holidays, or X discount on X item. It's really important to keep both sides of the house in mind. And so, yeah, I think this leads us into a step back of how to start thinking about and how to start planning creative strategy. And if you want to hover on that slide real quick.
For sure.
The title slide, actually. So creative strategy, I get asked this a lot, and I've had to answer it a lot. I remember, I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was in an interview and I was asked, well, what is the difference between creative strategy, channel strategy, content strategy, brand strategy? And it really forced me to be like, I'd never really thought about it like that. I had to really parse out and find the dividing lines between those disciplines. And so how here at Tinuiti we treat creative strategy is really, it's 3 parts. What is the platform? What is the idea, the brand platform, the creative platform that, whether it's a brand, whether your brand agency produced it, whether we produce it ourselves, what is the core campaign idea that we feel strongly about? It's built against, a consumer mindset that we want to align with. It's built against key insights. We just know we need to take it to our core audience. And then the next step for us is orchestration. So how do we take that big platform and orchestrate it into little pieces that can disseminate across your media mix? Because if you look at the media landscape, it's so fragmented. It's so hard to convey a singular big idea, a core campaign idea. So how do we do it in pieces, knowing that's how it has to happen? So that's the orchestration part. And then the last one is tactics. So what are the tactics? And that's a lot of what you'll hear from Carla is it short form? What needs to happen in the first 3 seconds? Are we utilizing influencers? Are we spending more in programmatic display first? And then, it's all around the tactics that guide those little pieces to be the best they can be. So that's, in a nutshell, that's creative strategy to us. It's left brain and right brain. And so I think it's really important to remember this and not to gloss over that the core creative itself is one of the biggest factors and performance levers of a campaign. I hope most of you would agree with that. But, I think as people maybe they're experts in media and experts in other disciplines, that they focus on the where and the when and the how, but not necessarily the what. And so what does it look like? What are we trying to say? And so we really, that's what we're trying to do. That's our canvas, right? What is the ad creative? Knowing that Nielsen has 63% of a performance lift being attributed to the quality of the creative. And that's, to me, that's a no-brainer. I'm like, well, I don't care if the placement's great. I don't care if I hit the optimal media mix. If the creative itself doesn't resonate or isn't built against the audience we're trying to tell it to, how would they not ignore that? Unless it's, you know, simple enough to, it's what they need. So, you know, as always, what you say is going to be key this holiday season, just like any other season. You know, as we talked about media fragmentation and kind of where Tinuiti sits as, you know, we're essentially building creative within a media shop, a performance media agency. How do we bundle performance messaging and like branding messaging? How do we collapse the funnel a little bit? And there's going to be times when it makes perfect sense to collapse the funnel, and then there's going to be times when it might not, and you might be trying to throw too many messages at your customer, and you might be trying to say too many things and muddy the waters to where they don't even take an action. And Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Hicks law?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So wait, what? Well, I don't remember. So Hicks law is on a landing page, right? It's when,
yeah, if I'm correct, you're totally putting me on the spot, but this is great. No, I love a fire round question. If I'm correct, it is directly correlates to the ability to convert based on an influx of options. So the fewer options, the better your conversion will be.
Yeah. And so
yeah,
perfect. That was our second surprise poll. But I think about this metaphor a lot. If you throw someone 6 tennis balls, they're likely not to catch any. But if you throw them one, they're likely to catch it. So how do we bundle messaging? How do we bundle things that we want our customers to do and things we want our customers to think about? And so it can be split into brand building and sales activation, kind of like the sales promo, the lower funnel, whatever you want to call it, versus upper funnel awareness, brand building, content creative. And we've pulled out some key differences between those two things, but you know, for the most part, I believe it's self-explanatory. But as we kind of look at the course of the season from September to December, that's where I was kind of talking about, if you've built your brand successfully and hedged your brand successfully ahead of your competition in the minds of your target audience, it gives you nice leeway and enough history and enough relationship with that audience to where you can really lean into heavy sales promo creative in December versus imagine the first time they hear of your brand, you're like trying to promote a discount, and it might work, but it might not. And so some ways to think about, well, what's in between those two things? How do we collapse a funnel? And those are going to be the mixed media ad types, where we're thinking about carousels and collections, shorter form video that can really contain and segue nicely from a why us to a why this product. So figuring out how to layer those different messages is going to be key, of course, for Q4 and beyond. But it's something we think about in all of our campaigns.
For sure. And I think that is the perfect setup to, you know, our approach for the tactical playbook for driving that monthly conversions through Q4. As we get into like the month by month, it is very much a distinct mix of the brand building versus performance. And there's no one size fits all approach. You have to really think a lot about your audiences, your segments, and not taking for granted, you know, some of the things that Kevin brought up at the top of the conversation around driving factors for purchases, that audiences and consumers, their brand loyalty is going to dip. Not taking for granted those loyalists. I think that is one of like the biggest mistakes that you could possibly make, is treating that group as the same way as you would say treat an acquisition group. So as we get into the playbook, high level, you know, we recommend a retrospective around the end of Q3, and then into September and October, we get into what we're calling awareness and priming, which is, you know, priming that audience that you may have and the audience that you may not have. And then into November, nurturing and converting. And lastly, December, you know, that's where the big holidays strike, is that last mile converting. But I think it's all table stakes. We know if you're really only thinking about conversion in December, you're probably missing the mark. But there's a lot more tactics and planning that goes into that ahead of time. So ideally, we'd love to convert right now, but folks are probably in the consideration phase up until November. But we have some distinct tactics that we recommend for your approach to winning the season. So to start, we'll go into the retrospective, which is really anything. We've got brands that start talking about their next holiday, next Q4, January of Q1. Like, it's never too early to look into your data and look into everything that you've learned from the previous holiday season, but we are recommending at least by the end of Q3. So we'll get into the retrospective, and I think Kevin will talk about how the pre-holidays are shaping up.
Yeah, so we're doing our due diligence of looking, okay, if holidays is the biggest retail season of the year, what is the second biggest, knowing it's, what is it, August? I don't know how this year is going by. How did the second biggest and third biggest retail season, how did that do this year? And so far, a pretty surprising turnout from Prime Day. We expected, especially mid-year, that I think it was the lowest customer sentiment or consumer sentiment since like the 1970s. Like, people just really weren't confident around where the economy was going. It was like everyone was afraid to say recession word, and it was just very unstable. And so, but it turned out this year's Prime Day was, of course, the biggest in Amazon's history. Only Bezos could turn that around, but it showed that these big retail events are still turning people out. And still, attracting a lot of promotional and shopping activity. I would be remiss not to mention this if you guys haven't heard, but there's been leaked documents saying that there is probably going to be a second Prime Day event in October. I don't know at what scale, but think of it as like an early access sale. And I'm thinking in my head, I would not want Amazon to beat me to the punch in October. Of getting all of people's gifting done in October because people think Prime Day might have the best sales or something. If I would want to think about how am I coming into the market in October and hedging myself against Amazon. And then, of course, the second, one of the, I guess this is the second biggest retail holiday is back to school. I have a stat. Course, I have stats on everything. It's 15%. Yeah, I can't help myself. It's 15% of annual consumer spending is around back to school.
Wow.
And over half of them had already started in early July, which is considerably higher percentage than even 2019, but up from last year a little bit.
Yeah, and I think
things are looking good. People are spending.
I agree. I think these stats are they're good milestone markers, in the business year to see like what the trends are so that you can plan accordingly for sure. And so one of the first things that we recommend that you do when you're in your pre-planning retrospective phase is like really not only just dissect the data that you have, but understand your historicals. I would recommend looking for those consumer patterns in that purchase behavior. What shopping moments from this year can inform spend for holiday, like we just discussed. Dissecting the segments in your data from previous holidays and from all throughout the year. Like, one of the biggest things to want to distill is like who only purchased once versus those who are your loyalists. Because again, you've got to talk to those two audiences differently, and don't take your loyalists for granted, because they're going to be in the consideration phase from other brands. They might love you, but they're not just purchasing for themselves, and they're also looking for deals, but it's not all about the deal. So don't take that audience for granted, for sure. Focusing on strategic offerings for the unique segments in your audience. So preparing those sneak peek messaging and VIP access as you prepare for that priming phase for your other audiences. And again, all of this requires a lot of upfront planning so that your scheduling feels natural and you strike when the iron's hot. Another really important approach, especially from a creative director myself, very much into the aesthetics of things. And, we've got stats that tell you that creative is that lever that really gives you that return on your ad spend is planning your creative approach. You don't want to wait until right up into November to be like, oh, we should probably get a photo shoot together. Like, this is the time, during the retrospective phase when you understand what your data is telling you, but to also be thinking forward about your campaign aesthetic. So one of the important things that you can do during this time is to continue to gather that precious gold first party data. Like, those pop-ups on your e-com site continue to be an invaluable resource for you to develop and deliver that relevant content to the right consumer at the right time. And you're seeing pop-ups are now becoming like, they can be a barrier to engagement. Like, somebody comes onto your e-com site, they want to shop. You bring up a pop-up and it's like, oh God, they're asking me to fill stuff out. That's why you always want some type of perk. Of course, that's a pretty traditional tactic, but we do recommend like having a more robust prompt, like dig in for a little bit of detail. And again, there's no one size fits all approach. It really takes a little bit of digging into like the kind of data that you really need to develop really targeted creative. But if you get more information out of the consumer at that first party level, that's going to allow you to create richer content on the back end. So I really, really highly recommend that. Of course, developing that unified campaign aesthetic. So distinct campaign photography, an on-brand holiday aesthetic, it's going to unify your creative and help you stand out from the crowd. I actually really love this example from Allbirds because they've clearly, like, they're using an unusual kind of color set. They've got some brand photography, but they've really developed and I will almost want to say curated their holiday campaigns so that in the media mix, when all the brands are sending content to consumers, they've got something distinct that matches their brand versus, pulling stock and just using the same old snowflakes and whatnots. Developing an aesthetic that feels distinctly you is going to be really important. And then, of course, we always recommend that you're nimble and adaptive. So again, as you plan out that campaign aesthetic, we recommend developing templates. And templates are important so that you can update and pivot your campaigns on the fly. Again, some of the things that Kevin brought up, there's always going to be some unforeseen challenges and shipping delays. You never know. So you want to make sure that you have something that's highly adaptable. Of course, you can go really robust and have some elements that you might want to be more evergreen for the campaign, but we always recommend having a complementary template set so that if something goes out of stock, if there's a production delay, you can pull that creative quickly and reserve something else that will still work. And also, last but not least, in the retrospective phase is that planning ahead for landing pages. So we talked a lot about the importance of landing pages, but again, like, if we're developing really great ads, no matter whether it's a display ad or an email, you got to have that specific page where there's something that drives the conversion. A lot of times landing pages are kind of that forgotten piece where you might be pushing product bundles or pushing a particular product in your holiday creative, and then it drives traffic to an e-com site, and well, where do I go? If it just pushes to that one product, okay, well, then you've got one kind of conversion. But if you've created a page where you can bundle products, that's even more, return on spend. So we definitely want to push and promote landing pages and planning for what that content will be in the retrospective so you have it ready to go when it goes live. So on into September and October is what we're calling the awareness and priming phase. So this is really all about, two areas, I think, which is, reaching new audiences, how you approach them, and then how you engage and nurture kind of your current audience. So sparking that curiosity about your brand, we really recommend that your messaging speak to those unique selling points of your brand. This is where we talk about a lot about that performance branding, collapsing that funnel. Obviously, we want to drive conversion, but this early, we want consumers to be thinking about your brand and understanding kind of the unique, distinct differences of you versus a competitor. Now is not really the time to promote sales per se, but it's never too early to promote brand perks like your free shipping rewards, alternative payment methods like we talked about, like anything that gives you the upper hand. It's great to promote those things now because it's not about a race to the bottom. Their audiences, we have that proof of this big spending holidays from earlier in the year. Folks are ready to spend. Folks have a healthy budget, but they're going to make logical decisions. It's not really the time to appeal to that emotion. They're going to buy your product because it is good. So break that out, really sell what about your brand makes your brand unique. Providing content that answers the consumer challenge at the moment. So this early, a lot of time gift guides, I don't think this is too early at all for a gift guide to pop out, because a lot of times folks are thinking, gosh, I know what to get for my kids, but my aunt who has everything, dear God, like those gift guides that specifically answer a challenge, who's hard to shop for are those who are even tempted to buy for themselves. And you see some great messaging from this Biossance. I think I'm saying that right. They're promoting their beauty gift guide. And then even in the messaging, they're saying treat yourself too. Never forget that line of adding that bit to your content, because again, a lot of times folks are shopping for others, but go ahead and tempt them into buying something for themselves to get the little bit of added purchase into the cart. And then now would be a great time to launch those landing pages that we planned out for, so in the previous phase, you should be wireframing and developing your content hierarchy, getting your product bundles together, et cetera, and having your creative team actually build and design out the landing page. But now, in accordance with whatever creative you want to put together to promote said gift guide, now would be the time to launch it so that you can drive traffic directly to that site. And then engaging your current audience, again, in the awareness and priming phase. So we talked a little bit about how you need to not take for granted your loyalists, your brand. There's a lot of, because of kind of the state of the state, brand loyalists will be considering others more than maybe you would have seen in previous years. So we want to nurture them, reward them, make them feel special. If I participate in a brand for all throughout the year, and I buy from them on the regular and I've got loyalty points, let's put that stuff in your creative. Like that should be a selling point to make sure that your that brand equity stays top of mind with your best customers. So you want to reward your loyalists with those VIP early access, any kind of exclusives, remind them that they've got perks and bonus points, all of the things that they've worked for, if you will, being great customers for your brand. Personalization, is always key. So again, use that data that you already have from your current audience to reward and encourage them to come back for holiday. Nurture the relationships you already have. I can't stress that enough. And then of course, like table stakes, but you want to update your existing creative to feature those seasonal touches. So a lot of times, especially in life cycle, you'll see, we'll do category sends or product sends or whatever kind of content that starts tailoring towards holiday. But keep in mind that you'll want to update your evergreen content. So your triggers, your welcome series, pop-up banners, like making sure that every touch point at the consumer level speaks holiday. Like those little details matter. Every touch point, there's an experience of holiday, and now is not too soon to plan that. And then branded Amazon content is always a great place for awareness. It can help drive increased conversion rates, traffic, and sales. And we highly recommend updating your storefront. And if you're not active on Amazon, that is one of the greatest places to get that brand awareness from folks that may not know your brand, because folks are searching on Amazon, especially if there's buzz about doing a second kind of Prime Day in October. Now would be a great time to get that Amazon storefront updated and have those those seasonal banners to help get folks bought into your brand. If they've never even heard of you, if they've never seen your content, they've never driven traffic to your website, they can buy from you on Amazon, which is an incredible motivator. All right, and now we'll get into November, where we call nurturing and converting. So in November, the holiday season is in full swing, obviously. So now is the time to strike. Like when it comes to both price and the YU, there's no holding back. But if you think about kind of the consumer mindset and the landscape of all of advertising, they're getting hit with everything right now. We're creators, we're marketers here at Tinuiti, but we are also consumers. So we know this full and true. Like, how do you stand out? How do you make your content the piece of content that compels audiences to purchase. So you want to continue to educate your audience. This is where we really get into, like, by November, that funnel is completely collapsed. You've got to continue to educate your audience on the why you. So continue talking about those unique product features. Your brand promise and consumer reviews are all really powerful motivators for shoppers who may be net new purchasers. Because if you think about it, like, in this period of the consumer shopping, they're in an extended consideration phase. A lot of folks are in that phase where they're probably considering even some of the brands that they've been loyal to, but they're also considering all those other brands that are hitting them. They're considering them on quality. They're considering them on price. They're considering them on speed. Like, there's so many things that are weighing in on the consumer. So you want to make sure that you're still speaking to those questions and the expectations of the consumer at the consideration phase. You don't want to miss out, because, again, we're not recommending a race to the bottom. The only motivation won't be price. So you've got to make sure that you're answering those other questions that they may have in order to get them to convert. But to counteract everything I just said, standing out on price is still important. You can't not have the Black Friday deals. Like, that's one of the major things that people are looking for. So, you still need to stand out on price when the competition is highest. It's not a race to the bottom. I can't stress it enough, but you do want to promote your best deals and discounts to convert during Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend, and the whole month, really. Your messaging should also speak to your value adds, like those shipping banners go a long way, as well as like bonus gifts, brand swag, anything that you might have additive is going to really add value. Alrighty. Reels, deals, and steals in this phase. So UGC content, thinking about how your brand shows up on like TikTok and IG, leveraging influencer to support those authentic reviews and give that consumer proof is going to be huge. I also really recommend redefining what Black Friday means for your brand. More and more brands are marketing Black Friday as the entire month of November and not just for that weekend. We've seen that going on for quite a few years. So consider adding a unique twist on your approach around the timing and the branding. You can go ahead and say, send messaging, Black Friday deals all month. Like, that's not recommended as long as it suits kind of your approach for your holiday campaign. And lastly, using the element of surprise. While all consumers are expecting those steep discounts during the Black Friday, Cyber Monday period, you can wow existing subscribers with unexpected exclusive sales, randomized discount codes, mystery, and flash. So all of those are tactics we really recommend during this time to drive that conversion, especially in advance of Black Friday. Or there's a great tactic that you can do, Black Friday extend it longer than, give folks the fear of missing out. Of course, you want them to convert when everyone's shopping that particular weekend, but it's not unheard of at all to go ahead and extend it and have some kind of creative that says, surprise, we're extending the sale, so that folks continue to consider your brand. And last but not least, we want to always add motion to drive your campaigns to action. We've seen a lot of content that is both static and animated, but motion creates emotion. We've a saying we use around here, and we always want to make sure that you're leveraging motion wherever you can, be it stop animation. Even if you haven't developed that kind of content, if you don't have full format video, we always want to make sure that you're including some sort of emotion, be it a slideshow, templates on Instagram, cropping some existing video content. There's so many things that you can do just to make sure that you're activating content that is eye-catching. There's lots of data. I'm sure Kevin probably has some data around the actual stats on conversion for getting folks to interact with your content. Alrighty, and then into December, your last mile conversion. So again, it's the most wonderful time of the year. You've been selling, your brand is killing it. How do we nail December and close out Q4? One of the biggest things that we recommend is to continue providing value during seasonal distractions. It's the busiest and most active time of the holiday season, right? That time right after Thanksgiving, as I want to say, and then on into December. There's lots of travel. There's lots of shopping. There's parties. There's this, there's that. It's just a really, really dense time of year for consumers. So shopping and travel specifically are at an all-time high, and a way that you can significantly add value to your content is to proactively notify your consumers of their shipping status. That's, again, one of our biggest recommendations is around meeting the consumer at the moment, thinking about what are their issues, how can I address a concern before they think about it when they engage with my brand. So notifying consumers of shipping status, holiday deadlines, product availability, top selling items, low stock, back in stock, like those type of in the moment, well-timed elements are really great things to keep in mind and adding to your creative. We also recommend capitalizing on cart abandons and retargeting, keeping in mind the likeliness of the distracted consumer. Sending cart abandon triggers and retargeting ads can bring them back for conversion. So the example on the right, those are smart banners that that's from a third-party partner called Zimbula, and you can embed these in your life cycle so that there's a little banner that shows up like at the top of your content, no matter what the message, but it will pull in the data from that you have gathered about the consumer and show them, their loyalty points, their cart abandons, their package tracking, and all that jazz. Last but not least is, that very last mile and beyond. So of course, the holiday season tends to wrap up towards the last half of the month. And how do you speak to that consumer? Of course, pushing for virtual gifts and gift cards is one of the best things that you can do for the last minute shopper. And then also capitalizing on returns and personal shopping. There's still a lot of that behavior happening. So meeting them again at the moment. They may have received gifts from your brand that don't work. That's part of the holiday season. You get stuff and you're like, thanks, gee whiz. So you can tailor your messaging to get what you really want and provide value by promoting those extended return windows. So, we made it through our tactical playbook. And I think up next is our creative testing roadmap.
Yeah, and I want to make sure we do allow some time for questions. So I'm gonna try to breeze through at least one of these slides. And if you go down to the next, something we have to think about at the forefront. So like today or September, how are we testing our creative decisions that we're going to be employing across the season? Whether it's creative format, ad type, copy messaging, A and B. What is the roadmap, and how are we using findings and kind of prioritizing the things that the decisions we want to make, and then allowing enough time to actually act on them. And it's important to have that all in a plan that is laid out for the next quarter. So yeah, performance is in our name here at Tinuiti. So we are obsessed with finding better ways to do creative. Nowhere else have I seen so many A and B columns in every brief and every little spreadsheet. How is the creative that we're putting out going to tell us whether or not it did as well as we think it could? And so testing is at our core. It's how we think. It's essential to improving over time. So Q4 is no different. What things would you want to test in October, in November, in December? The banners that Carla was talking about with free shipping. What are the two ways of talking about it? For the entire, I guess it's Black Friday month now. So what would you like? How do you kind of bundle your brand messaging with your promotional messaging for an entire month? Like, what is the right kind of angle into it? I'd ideally test it and then have it be present on the actual peak of the holiday in late November. So we have a few examples in the next slide, I believe. And these are like the really large categories. I know everyone has different testing budgets and different allowances for what they want and what they care about testing. So at a very high level, here's kind of like the biggest things we care about: message preference, creative length, and ad format type. A lot of times it starts with ad format, I would say. So like early in the season, you're kind of getting at, carousels performing better than collections if I'm trying to drive lower funnel actions, or static or short form video better? Okay, if video is better, how long is too long until I lose my audience? And again, this goes back to my golden rule. If you have something important to say and it takes 15 seconds to say it, then run your 15-second ad, while still, maybe you iterate and have a 6-second version that you can optimize against. But those are the three biggest ones we think about. And then of course the smaller tactical things, logo placement. Where are you putting logos? Where are you putting on-screen supers or copy? What does it say? Looking at product versus lifestyle imagery. This kind of goes back to, if you think of a heat map, if you show someone an ad, where does their eye go first? Well, we have eye quant, and it tells you that it goes towards the image, and then it goes up, and then it goes down. So what is the image you show them? Knowing that's one of the first things they look at. Is it, is it a picture of a product? Is it a picture of maybe the product being used in a more of an emotional context? And of course that factors into the month you're showing it in. If it's very early in the season, demonstrate an aspirational setting and evoke a feeling of what it would feel like if you bought that product, versus later in the month, hone in on the product. This is what it is. This is when you'll get it. And copy. So we do have, different ways to perform multivariate tests where you're able to isolate a single variable of, like, within 2 ads, I want to know if I run the same, if I run the copy here and not here, what angle should I take into the actual the ad copy that I have on platform? It's very hard to isolate copy as the variable. So there's different tools to go about it. Typically it's a more expensive one. That's why it's slated towards the bottom. But the big things here, again, ad format type, creative length, and then playing around with messaging. Those are the 3 biggest things we look at. And then if we have this sample calendar to see how it would play out against kind of what I just talked about, of you're testing brand maybe early in the season and then extending promo throughout. And then of course, always evergreen copy tests. And then just a case study to show, how we've applied some light A/B and testing, and a really simple switch with a big result of just simply kind of honing in on what kind of motion do we need to do. Is it full video or is it just animated graphics on a static image? Well, it turns out that happy medium was where it was at. So yeah, that's kind of like a quick wrap on creative testing. I know we've got 5 minutes left, so we'll wrap with our key takeaways here and kind of make room for questions. So first, obviously get in front, stay ahead of your audience this year. That is they're going to be in market sooner. So why shouldn't you consider being in market sooner too? And then aligning your channel mix to head in the same direction. So thinking about messaging, sure, nuance for the platform, but take a step back and say, how am I communicating as a whole across each month? And then connecting it to the landing page that they see should they take that action. And then let's see, I believe 3 and 4 is
mine. Yeah. So of course the creative director is going to weigh in. I can't stress enough, plan your creative aesthetic early and vary those tactics month to month, also stressing that being nimble. So, doing those product shoots, if you have budget, working with your creative team to develop an outline, how do I speak to my audience? How do I speak to the holiday audience that feels distinctly our brand? You don't want to go generic and just be pulling stock, but also staying nimble, using templates and varying those creative tactics month to month. Seeding your brand and product value will be key, not necessarily price. So we kept using the phrase, it's not a race to the bottom. It's a collapsed funnel where you're going to continue to weave in that brand promise, the brand, the why of the brand. And think about it this way, the folks are in an extended consideration phase. So keep seeding the why my brand and not necessarily driving just on price. And meeting the consumer at the moment. There's so many different challenges. And again, one of the reasons we took this approach of a tactical playbook month to month is that audience behavior is shifting month to month. And so understanding some of those milestone moments and having a creative platform, creative content that answers them at their every need at those moments, and even those micro moments, what their needs are close to holiday when they're looking for their products, embedding that live tracker, those live smart banners to answer some of those questions. And Kevin, I think the last one's yours.
Yeah, always connected to a testing roadmap. I think making creative decisions in a vacuum can lead to a lot of waste or a lot of unknowingness of what caused something to perform. So going into your monthly segments, if you want to break it out like we did, of kind of thinking about early season, November, and then late season, what are the key things you want to find out in each segment, and then applying it to an overall roadmap that you can then prioritize in terms of what is most important to you and when do I need to find the answers that I can then optimize later in the season.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much, Carla and Kevin, for walking through what everyone needs to do, especially that roadmap. I loved the breaking it down month by month of what you need to do in order to have a great creative throughout Q4. For our audience, if you're interested in having a conversation about how you can add creative to your portfolio of what you work with Tinuiti for, we have a poll open right now where you can indicate that. Again, you can toggle over from chat to polls. In order to do so, we would be happy to have a consultation about what that could look like for your portfolio. So as you answer that, there is still time to drop in questions for our Q&A. We have a few minutes with Carla and Kevin of questions to answer for them. I know Melanie had one in the chat that Kevin got to. But want to hear from you all. First, we'll do rapid fire question of everything you all talked about and everything you're seeing for Q4. What would you say is the biggest opportunity for brands, and what is something that you really caution brands against for Q4 in terms of creative?
Love that question. I think I'll take the part about caution against. I can't stress it enough. Not understanding your segments. So really understand utilize the existing data that you have, because it's a sample. If this were a scientific experiment, there's so much science and creative, at least in our approach here at Tinuiti. But yeah, you have a sampling of audience behavior, at your fingertips. That's in your data. So not digging in, not doing that retrospective, I think that would be the biggest mistake. And it's not a one size fits all approach, especially for your brand loyalists. So understanding how to speak to them and how to make sure that you acknowledge the fact that they're going to be in an extended consideration phase, if you will. So that's my part of that question. I don't know. What was the other part again?
Caution and opportunity.
Ooh, opportunity. Kevin,
I mean, I'll jump in. I guess a little bit of branding goes so far in my head. Like, if you look at Amazon, there's a lot of alphabet soup brands, and they got no branding, and it's pure utility. When you can complement utility with a little bit of branding and belief of what you're buying, it goes, I believe, really far, especially if you can reach someone early enough.
I agree. So a recommendation for that, I think would be a really great opportunity, is branding your holiday campaign, if you will. So kind of, we saw in that Allbirds example, they took a bit of a different approach, which is, some of it can be like, oh, that was a daring departure. They broke from the typical color schemes that you might see around holiday, but there's so much around Q4 and holiday that is typical. Mm-hmm. Depending on your brand, partnering with your creative agency, with your design team, whoever you've got driving your creative message, figuring out how to strategically position your visuals to be a little bit more unique and distinct to your brand, so that it's memorable, so that they, again, when they're considering you with other brands, that you're top of mind when they are ready to convert.
I definitely agree with that. I know for me, especially on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, when you're getting all those sales emails, anything that does stand out usually gets the skip, as opposed to just trying to mass go through everything. So definitely agree there. Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so we'll wrap the Q&A. So Carla, if you can go to the next slide, we would love for you all to take a look at our newly redesigned content hub. I'm sharing that link out right now. We have lots of great resources on there, including guides like we had attached in our handout section, upcoming events. We have our huge Q4 playbook happening next week and the following. We'd love to see you all at. And so make sure to take a look at that. Also, I pushed out a link prior, and it'll redirect you after the session as well. We'd love your feedback on the session. if you could take a minute or two to review the session and also let us know what you'd like to see in the future. We love taking that into account, especially when it comes from our clients. So we can go to the final slide. I want to sincerely thank Carla and Kevin for coming on and sharing all of your expertise, and for our audience as well for joining. We really appreciate it. We hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.